Hey, good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Hi? Yes? No? Okay. Hi, welcome back from break. Welcome to the rest of the semester, I guess, right? You've got stuff to do in the next couple of weeks? Things, little things, good. You guys have really good music in your chapels. I went to Bible college, a little Bible college in Minnesota, and we didn't really I don't remember music in the chapels at all, and I don't really remember the chapels very much because I failed chapel, which is why I was asked to leave the school. But I can't help but wonder if the music hadn't been better, maybe I wouldn't have failed chapel, and then maybe I wouldn't have gotten kicked out, and maybe my life would have turned out much better. But anyway, be thankful for the good music in your chapels because it inspires you to get up in the morning and come to them. Hi kids, I'm Bob the Tomato, but you know that, so we won't dwell on that. I was here, I did two chapels, although if you're freshmen, okay, you're freshmen, you weren't here last year. I spoke twice in chapel last year. You're freshmen, you missed it, sorry, your loss. I did more voices then. No. Hello, I'm an Archibald Asparagus, a grumpy, uptight British asparagus. Okay, yeah. Freshman cheer. And I'm also Mr. Lante, somewhat cantankerous, decorative gourd, who loves to sing about cheeseburgers. And a really old, cranky grape that you may or may not be familiar with. Or perhaps you just know me as the voice that says, and now it's time for City Songs with Larry, the part of the show where Larry comes out and sings a city song. All right, that was for the freshmen. Thank you very, very much. The first time I spoke about dreams. And in particular, I spoke about how a dream, even a dream for impact and a dream for doing good can become an idol if you let it define you. Something very good can become something very bad. The second time I spoke about burdens and how we give ourselves burdens, worldly burdens that can crush us, that can make us miserable, but that Jesus invites us to take his burden, to exchange our worldly burdens for his burden, which is light. If you missed it because you're a freshman and you weren't here last year, or because you were really sleepy those days, they're online. You can go back and check them out. Today I want to talk to you about pictures. Specifically about your picture in your head of what the Christian life is like, or even on a broader scale, what's the picture you have in your head of how the world works and your place in it? And I want to tell you kind of how my picture in my head evolved over time. When I was a kid, I grew up in a very Christian environment, going to a very conservative evangelical free church in Muscatine, Iowa. My parents were Christians, my grandparents were Christians, my great-grandparents were Christians, going back a gazillion years, I believe even before the time of Jesus. We were already Christians in our family. We're where he got the idea, as far as I can tell. Not that we get any credit, but, somebody had to suggest it. And so growing up, very, very Christian, I heard Christian-y stuff talked about all the time. I didn't hear, though, a lot about what Christians were supposed to do. I mostly heard about what Christians were not supposed to do, were supposed to not do. So I knew that as a Christian, I was not going to drink. I was not going to smoke. I was probably not going to dance at my wedding. I would not go to pool halls. I would not play cards other than Rook. Yeah, Rook fans. Is there a Rook group here? Yeah. The Bible College Rook team. And most of all, I would never, ever set foot in a bar, not even to have a Diet Coke. That's what a Christian did not do. Now, my grandparents gave a lot of money to world missions, which I knew was apparently important, but they didn't really talk as much about why, so I had to kind of conclude myself why world missions was important. And it was important, I figured, because then people would go and they would tell, half-naked tribesmen in Africa or Irian Jaya about Jesus. And once they had met Jesus, then the half-naked tribesmen could stop smoking and stop drinking and stop hanging out in pool halls, and for heaven's sakes could put some clothes on and could never, ever, ever set foot in bars. This is the picture I had of the Christian life. It was a highly practical thing. I mean, it seemed like a good thing. It seemed like the kind of thing that would keep you out of trouble, would keep you from winding up in prison or in a ditch somewhere in a back alley in Las Vegas or in the trunk of someone's car, So it seemed very valuable to me and practical. What it didn't seem was all that exciting. I kind of longed for a world with a little more, magic. A little more, I wanted superpowers, I wanted to be, I liked stories that were a little more exciting than just staying out of bars and avoiding bad people. I was also kind of a scientific kid. I like to figure out how things worked. I like to take things apart. I like to read about stuff. I like to learn about science. I love physics, and I like the fact that you could describe motion with math equations. And I got a Atari 400 personal computer when I was a freshman in high school, and I started doing programming. And I liked this side of the world, this very rational side of the world. I liked to use intellect. So I was excited. I was a freshman in high school when Carl Sagan's miniseries Cosmos was aired on PBS. And Carl Sagan was one of America's foremost scientists, and he took 10 nights on PBS to explain to America, in the words of the author Douglas Adams, life, the universe, and everything. And the very first statement that he made on PBS, I mean, the series was so successful, it put him on the cover of Time magazine. All of America sat down to learn a new picture of the universe. The very first words he stated as the series opened on the first night, you were looking at a star field and the stars, you were drifting through stars, and if you know how Carl Sagan talks, he has a rather distinctive lilt. And he started out by saying, "The cosmos is all that is, all there ever was, and all there ever will be." He was painting a radically different picture of the world than the one I had grown up with. I mean, the picture I had been painted as a kid, as a Christian kid in a conservative church in Muscatine, Iowa, it was very practical and not all that exciting, but it was also very comforting because I knew that behind the curtain there was God, that always, no matter what happened, there was God standing behind, underneath, holding up, and that he was always there for me. But now Carl Sagan was giving me a very different picture, basically explaining to America that there is nothing out there. There is nothing transcendent. There is no God, no miracles, nothing behind the curtain, that there is no magic in the universe. Many people found this a little depressing. They didn't like this new picture of the world, but Sagan didn't care, and instead he responded to the critics by simply saying it was better by far to embrace the hard truth than a reassuring fable. And it really struck me. So is everything that I was taught growing up, all these great Bible stories that decorated the walls of our church basement Sunday school classrooms, were they just reassuring fables? I had two very different pictures of the world that I was trying to decide between. And frankly, I wasn't all that excited about either one of them. Suddenly, the world was being divided into people who lived by faith and people who lived by reason. And this was challenging for me because I was kind of an intellectual little kid. I liked reason. I didn't want it to be just a binary decision. But more and more the world was being divided up. As Sagan wanted America to grow up and to get your medicine, take your medicine, there's nothing here but us, get over it, live by reason, not by faith. Guys like Richard Dawkins took it even further and said, religious faith is like the smallpox virus, only harder to eradicate. And then philosopher Daniel Dennett chimed in and insists that people who live by reason are simply smarter than people who live by faith. He says, we don't believe in elves or ghosts or the Easter Bunny or God. Ouch. So believing in God is like believing in the Easter Bunny? Suddenly being a quote-unquote person of faith didn't sound very bright. I was scared. I was scared that I would lose my faith, that I was facing a decision between rationality and faith. I was scared that at any moment there would be just one more scientific discovery that would take God away for good, that there was one question out there that I would bump into from some skeptic that would take God away, that would make me lose my faith. So, where do we go if the world takes away faith? Well, for me, I went to Disney World. I've always been a big Disney fan. I love the creativity of Disney. I love even the technology behind the creativity and the storytelling, and it's just such a feel-good. It makes you feel good. You feel good when you're at Disney World and everything is the way it should be. And so I listen, even today, I listen to Disney fan podcasts. And it's kind of interesting because they interview old Imagineers and they say, what was it like when you did that thing with Walt with the thing? And they tell you, and it's like, wow, that's so cool. But if you spend any time listening to Disney fan podcasts, you realize that for many, many, many people, Disney has become much more than just a periodic vacation destination. It has become a way of life. It has become a quasi-religion. Don't believe me? Well, we've all seen cars with the little Christian Jesus fish on the backsides, and then we've all seen the skeptic cars with the little Darwin fish on the backside, and then we've seen the cars from the sarcastic Christians with the Jesus fish eating the Darwin fish as our little bumper sticker fish war escalates. But there's a growing number of cars that you'll see nowadays that instead of the Jesus fish or the Darwin fish, they have a little chrome Mickey in the same spot, saying, now this is what I choose. This is my belief system. My wife and I were married 22 years ago in a church, and most people 22 years ago were married in churches. That was kind of typical. Today, this year, more than 2,300 couples will be married on Disney property. Their dream for their wedding location is to be married at Disney World. The number one location at Disney World to be married is the wedding chapel on the Seven Seas Lagoon. And if you're lucky enough to be able to book the wedding chapel on the Seven Seas Lagoon, it's right across the lagoon from the Magic Kingdom. And in all your wedding pictures, you and your spouse and company-provided officiant will be pictured with right between you over your shoulder, Cinderella's castle, in the exact spot a cross would be if it was a church wedding. This is what your bond is about. This is your covenant. What is going on? How has Disney become for so many people an alternative to Christianity? Weddings at Disney have grown so popular that the Walt Disney Company is now offering their own line of Disney-themed wedding dresses for the bride who wants the complete magical Disney princess wedding experience. Don't tell me it's not appealing. Walt Disney loved the wish fulfillment of old world fairy tales, but he equally loved the optimism and endless possibilities of the American dream. He romanticized America's frontier past, yet he was wildly optimistic about her technological future. He wrapped all of this together into a quasi-religion based on wish fulfillment, whose holy scripture contains but one verse: when you wish upon a star, your dreams come true. The two most important words in the Disney belief system are dreams and magic. Magic represents the interruption of the natural world, supernatural intervention, something behind the curtain working things out for our benefit. Dreams represent wish fulfillment, our happily ever afters. The problem is that the modern Western world, the world of my childhood and high school years, has killed both. There is no magic, we are told, and therefore there is no reason to hope for a happily ever after. But we aren't happy with that answer. We mourn the loss of magic and happy endings. And for many Americans, Walt Disney has given us the next best thing: artificial magic and simulated happy endings. Pretend supernatural. A magical kingdom where you're always happy, there are no tears, nothing bad will ever happen. A land free of sin. A land where you can feel like a prince or a princess, a child of a king. And so hundreds of millions of people have flocked to Disney for a taste of the way things could be, to feel like a prince or a princess under the eye of a benevolent monarch. I myself have sort of a love-hate relationship with Disney. I mean, I love the creativity, and I love the artistry, and I love the technology behind it all. But whenever I'm listening to a fan podcast or walking around a Disney theme park, and I see these, mega fans, I find myself wanting to go up to them and say, this is pretend, right? I mean, this is fake. It's not real. We're not having a real adventure because the car or the boat or whatever it is, it's on rails. It does exactly the same thing every time. It's not real. But maybe it's the best we can do. Maybe it's the closest we can come to finding what our hearts are longing for. Or maybe we just need to ignore that longing, deaden it, and get back to work in a universe without magic. Well, C.S. Lewis has a quote dealing with this longing, these longings in us for something bigger, for something beyond. He says, "It would seem to him that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. We are far too easily pleased." What if we aren't longing for too much? What if we're settling for too little? What if there really was magic in the world? What if we really could be sons and daughters of a king? What if there were superpowers available to us? What do you say to a little boy who wants to be a superhero, or a little girl who wants to be a princess? You can. You can. It all starts with faith. No, not that. Precious Moments figurines on a Christian bookstore shelf. I don't want to stop thinking. I don't want to walk away from science and reason. Well, hang on, wait a minute. Is faith really the opposite of reason, of thinking? Those who say this have consciously and horribly redefined the word faith. The opposite of faith is not reason. The opposite of faith is mistrust. What is faith? Faith is a statement of trust in what we do not know for sure. Faith is belief in something that isn't absolutely certain. Many non-religious people, like Carl Sagan, describe themselves as non-believers, as people who are fact-based, not faith-based. This, as we used to say in Iowa, is hogwash. No one is a non-believer. Everyone has beliefs, has faith, or they would never leave their homes. Walking out your front door is an act of faith. Faith that the rule of law is still in effect, that drivers will attempt to stay in their own lanes, that your favorite restaurant is attempting to safely handle and prepare food. Do we know any of this for certain? Of course not. We take it on faith. People who truly have no faith would never get out of bed. And even if you won't get out of bed, that shows that you have faith that your bed will not spontaneously burst into flames, or that the invisibly tiny dust mites in your pillow will never transform into giant spiders unexpectedly. What's more, science itself, the science I loved as a kid, is based in faith. As much as Richard Dawkins and Carl Sagan would like to ignore it, there's a faith presumption behind modern science. This is the presumption, quite impossible to prove, that the universe is rational. Science is based on what author James Trefil calls the principle of universality. It says that the laws of nature we discover here and now in our laboratories are true everywhere in the universe and have been true through all of time. This is not a scientific statement. It cannot be tested, proven, or disproven. This is a statement of faith. Everyone is faith-based. Could I strap you into a chair, put you in a metal tube, and launch you 36,000 feet in the air? Does that sound like a good idea? Millions of us do it every day. We get into airplanes, metal tubes, we strap ourselves in chairs, and we get launched 36,000 feet in the air. Why does that seem like a good idea? Because we have faith in the technology. Okay? I fly frequently. And my faith in airplanes has grown because of two things. Number one, I have a knowledge of airplanes. I actually understand the concept of the airfoil and how a wing generates lift and how the combination of thrust and lift creates flight. I actually read about it once because I was interested. I was a curious kid. I know about airplanes, but I also, even more importantly, I know airplanes. I have had experience with airplanes. I have gone up in airplanes enough that I know it repeatedly works, even though every now and then it doesn't. Still, the odds are on my side. I'm a logical kid. I know that. Now, having said that, if I were, you say, I'm supposed to take a flight on Aeroflot Airlines from Moscow to Siberia on an old Russian airliner, my level of faith would be significantly less. Not because of what I don't know, but because I know that their engineering standards and safety standards are slightly less. So faith grows through knowledge of and experience with. Faith is a prerequisite of all of life, not just life with God. So is faith the opposite of reason? Of course not. Reason strengthens faith. Reason directs faith toward people and things worth trusting. Reason tells you not to place your faith in a chair made out of tissue paper or a strange man in a crowd who says he'd like to hold your wallet just for a little while. Reason and faith go hand in hand. Even in the Bible, faith is based on reason, on knowledge. Luke, as he's writing his gospel, starts out by saying, "Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught." Eyewitnesses, certainty, investigated. These are the words of faith. Does Walt Disney show us how to achieve true happiness? No. He shows us how deeply we long for a kingdom where everything has been put right. Do Carl Sagan and Richard Dawkins prove that the natural world is all there is? Of course not. They begin with that as their premise and reject any evidence to the contrary. Are you looking for evidence in this picture of the world in your head that Christian hope is not false hope? Sit down with an 80-year-old missionary and ask them about their life. Read the stories of church fathers and leaders in the faith. Listen to the testimonies of those in your own Christian community. Is believing in God like believing in the Easter Bunny? Really? Has anyone ever claimed to have their life transformed by the Easter Bunny? No? Did an encounter with the Easter Bunny inspire William Wilberforce to fight for 30 years to end the slave trade? Did a personal encounter with the Easter Bunny inspire Martin Luther King with courage, love, and nonviolence when his own home was firebombed and all those around him were ready to pick up arms? Has the Easter Bunny been at my side, walking with me throughout my entire life? No? Well, maybe we shouldn't put much stock in the Easter Bunny. Perhaps believing in God is nothing like believing in the Easter Bunny. Do you long for a happily ever after? Read the end of the book. We win. The victory is in the bag already, and there's nothing we can do to lose it. You can't lose. Do you want superpowers? We got them. Jesus says, "Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father." Jesus is offering us superpowers. This is the promise of Christianity, the true picture you should have in your heads. The promise of Christianity, the promise of abundant life beyond eternal life with God, is superpowers. The fruit of the Spirit: supernatural peace, joy, and love. Supernatural ability to bring peace and healing like Mother Teresa. To forgive like Corrie ten Boom. To love our enemies like Martin Luther King. When we're kids, we tend to focus our attention on superpowers like the power of flight or X-ray vision. But you can have the ability to fly and still be lonely. You can have X-ray vision and still be a jerk. In fact, it might even make it easier to be a jerk. What we really long for are the superpowers that Jesus offers and the Spirit of God delivers. I'm still a scientific kid, but my life is filled with magic, and I have superpowers. Okay. Let me tell you this story. I got an email from a fan a couple of years ago, and they said, you really need to read this guy's blog post. So I went to this guy's blog, and he was a dad somewhere on the East Coast, and he was telling the story of his own depression. He'd been wrestling with depression for several years, and it had gotten so bad that he finally came to the conclusion that his family would be better off without him. And so one day he decided he was going to take his own life. Well, he was going to wait till his wife was at work and his two young daughters, were at school, and he was going to end his life. And they would come home and he would be gone. But he said while he was contemplating this, he couldn't get a voice out of his head. It was the voice of Bob the Tomato. They were not a Christian family, but they bumped into a VeggieTales video, picked it up at Walmart or somewhere, and their daughters liked it, so they got a few more. And so the VeggieTales had been playing around the house for a few months. And he said, as he was trying to plan how to take his own life, what he couldn't get out of his head was the voice of Bob the Tomato saying over and over again, remember, God made you special, and he loves you very much. And he said what drove him crazy was how certain that tomato sounded about that. And he finally got down on his knees and said, okay, God, I want to be as certain about that as that tomato is. And he said he was filled with warmth and immediately knew how much God loved him. And when two little girls came home from school that day, they still had a dad. I did that. Well, okay, God did it through me, but that's not the point. To those girls, I am a superhero. If God can do things like that through a tomato, think what he can do through you. There is magic behind the universe, and we can take part. The Matrix, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, The Chronicles of Narnia. Humanity loves these stories because they show us worlds where there is more going on than meets the eye, where what we see is not all there is. Worlds where Carl Sagan is wrong. Well, guess what? We live in one of those worlds. Carl Sagan is wrong. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't go to Disney World. If you want to go to Disney World, go to Disney World. Have fun. If you want to dress up like a superhero and go to Comic-Con, go to Comic-Con. Have a great time. But examine your longings. What are you longing for? And even more importantly, what are you settling for? Are you settling for mud pies when you've been offered eternity? Are you settling for life as a spectator when you've been offered superpowers of your own? What's the picture you've been given of Christianity? A bunch of rules to keep you out of trouble? Throw that picture away. Christianity is the offer of a supernatural life, not a religion, but a relationship with the Creator God who entered history and speaks to men and women even today, who spoke to a man through a donkey a few millennia ago and through a tomato just a few years ago. So how do you get this life? How do you grow your faith in God? Like faith in anything, planes, chairs, medicine, 2 simple steps. The first step to this supernatural life is to know about God. Get a good study Bible. Pay attention in your Bible classes. Talk to an old missionary. Read the stories of the saints. And then step 2, get to know God. Take him at his word. Step out on faith, faith that comes from reason, from knowledge of God, what he has done and what he says he will do. There is magic behind the curtain. What we see is not all there is. Don't settle for less than the life you were created for. You are a child of the King. Let that picture motivate your every waking moment. Let me pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day and for the opportunity to get back to our studies. What fun. But there is a purpose behind this. Keep us focused on the purpose, to see the world as it truly is, a world with science and magic side by side, a world where mere mortals are given access to superpowers. Help us paint that picture of the world for our neighbors and our friends and the rest of a watching world so they can be drawn to you as well. Thank you for this time together. In your Son's name, amen.